Hey everybody, welcome to today's session on being a marketer as a self-published author and the science of that. So give me just a second though, because I got some feedback on the audio. So I'm kind of excited about this topic. It's one of the things that took me forever to figure out exactly how to do what I'm doing. And unlike other talks you may have seen on this topic of how do I market my books, this is not going to tell you, hey, do these 6 things and you'll blow up on social media, or do this one thing and you're going to sell 1 million copies. This is really about how do you evaluate, you as an author, or anyone really that's trying to market something, how do you effectively take a step back and make decisions, like financial decisions about it. I've got a worksheet you can download from my website that'll just help you walk through this for your own purposes. I'm going to drop that in the chat. And so let's get started. I think, as an author, that's kind of why I'm here today, is because I started marketing this stuff as an author. Professionally, I also market and sell, but this was something I'm doing for my own purposes, and it's a little closer to home when it's your work. And if you know me, I like to tell some jokes. So, as an author, I really want to have, it's great to win an award. I've got the Mom's Choice Award for my children's books. But I heard about a scarecrow the other day that he got an award. Yeah, the scarecrow got the award for outstanding in his field. Anyway, sorry, that was horrible. We're going to talk about grade school science, right? So if you remember science from grade school, one of the things they didn't talk about, and why it's in red here, is a budget. So the one deviation from grade school science is that we do have to have a budget for what we're doing with these marketing experience. But if we take a step into it, then the first step in grade school science was observation. We're going to observe something about the world, and that's what you're going to do with what you're trying to market. What is your observation about the world that gives you some insight into how you're going to sell and market your book? The next thing is what questions does that observation bring? Like you've seen something about the world, you see how that might relate to your books. So now you've got to ask a question. Then we're going to have a hypothesis. This is the market hypothesis, like what we're taking to market. Then we're going to actually conduct an experiment. Like, what does an experiment look like? How do we know whether we're moving along? From that experiment, you're going to collect some conclusions. And then finally, once you've got those conclusions, you're going to report it. And this is what we learned in, 3rd grade, 4th grade. How do you conduct science, right? So when we get started with this, I think the first thing to look at is budget. You've got to think about it in terms of how much can you lose financially and still sleep at night. The fact of the matter is, marketing doesn't turn over all that often. Depending on whose numbers you look, you're somewhere between at the best case scenario I saw with like direct mail marketing, like at a 4% rollover. Some people will say 20%, but the net of it is it's a very imprecise thing that's prone to failure. And so any market experiment you might try may just flat fail. Like your observation hypothesis, etc., might be completely off. And so you've got to look at it, how much can you afford to lose on an experiment? So I'm personally working with $1 a day. I think that's something I can cope with losing, and I can then sleep at night. So now once I've come up with that budget, what it is that I can afford to lose, that sets a budget for the experiment. Like, how does the experiment going to go forward? From there, then, we're going to look at, an observation. So for your work, whatever you've written, you want to go look at the comps. You want to look at comparable titles. You want to look at things going on in the world right now, right? Like if you've got something that's relevant to a holiday, it's about Christmas time and you've got a Christmas time story, well, that's an observation, right? What's going on in the world? Well, I've been to a lot of homeschool conferences, and one of the things I noticed was there's this series of books by Ted Decker, the Millie Maven series, that's got a young girl protagonist. It's written for about the same age or range mine is. So, that that could add some insight. I could observe that people are buying, people are buying books sort of like mine. So what question does that raise, right? So if you think about the question, you're trying to see, now that you've got this focal point, this thing in the market that you think you can be like, the thing you can make work. The next thing is, what is your question? And it's really about, in this case I said, well, how does Ted Decker sell his book? And I went and I found, through his Facebook, he's got these sets of books. He sells sets of books. So my question was, well, could I sell my sets of books that have a similar protagonist to this homeschool market? Is that something I could do? Is that something that would work? So then the next step, once you've got a question, you're like, hey, here's something I know about the market or what people are buying. Here's a question that relates that back to my work. Now you come up with a market hypothesis. So a market hypothesis has many different aspects, and the list I'm using is what I use when I do an analysis. Could be a little bit different than what might be in the marketing school per se, but this is a simple way for you to break down that hypothesis and make sure you've covered everything to be able to conduct an experiment. The first thing is, who is your audience? Who do you think would appreciate an advertisement, whatever you're trying to sell? Who would appreciate that? So in my case, I'm looking at homeschoolers. I think the Christian homeschool market is an audience for my work. And I think, based on my experience at conventions and seeing what happened with my comparable title, I think that's a good place to start. I also happen to know from that experience that in that audience is mostly women. That is, women are the buyers of books for kids. And that's something I actually verified through other sources. The next thing you got to think about in your hypothesis, and I'm picking on views here because when you're using different medium, whether it's YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Instagram, there's lots of places you can go do advertising. There are a few variables in it. One is views. Like, so if you're being sold a package, right? One of the questions, well, how many views do I expect to get? And if they've got that information, great. The next bit of information is a little trickier, though, because sometimes they can't tell you clicks, right? So they might be able to tell you their audience has, typically 3,800 views of content posted, but they might not be able to tell you the click-through rate. And so then you've got to be able to do some kind of math on that to go, okay, if there's this many views, I'm going to estimate 10% of those views will click. Right? You've got to be able to come up with that. But that's part of your hypothesis. That's part of the math you've got to be able to do. And then the next part is, okay, so they clicked through, they saw my actual item for purchase. They went from the advertisement to the Amazon page to my personal web page. What is the conversion rate? How many people that actually click through do I expect to make a purchase? Now, this is something that is a net new person to this. You might not know either one of those. And so typically what I try for an experiment to get started, if I've got no data or anything like that, I look at clicks around 10%. I just kind of take that as a rough, finger to the wind. And as I run the experiment, I get smarter about that and make adjustments. But, if I've been doing this for a while, clicks, 10% conversion rate, I try to be very conservative when I'm doing the go, no-go. And so I look at that as 0.5% of that click rate, right? So it's very small when I do that initially. Eventually, if I get some more data about it, I might be able to increase that and have a better idea. But net new, 0.25% or 0.5% conversion rate is a good place to start to help you make decisions that don't, sort of lead to spending money in a silly way. And then once you got that, then you're going to need to know the purchase price. Like, what are you selling? How much does it cost? And what are the cost of goods sold? And so you use all of these numbers. You figure out who your audience is, which gives you a scale of just how big it is. You're going to then find how many views, and that's you typically can get views from the platform. Clicks is also pretty typical, something you'll get in the platform, but then you've got to estimate a conversion rate. And like I said, I'm pretty conservative on that. I look at, 0.25% or 0.5% conversion rate to do this. And then finally, purchase price, that's what you're selling. Now, one of the other things about this in the go, no go is really thinking about, purchase price and cost of goods sold. You've got to look at it in terms of is it going to remotely be profitable? So I'm going to give you an example. So I mentioned this sort of Millie Maven. I think I can sell like that to homeschoolers. The thing in the upper corner is the stats from Facebook. Facebook said I'm going to reach roughly 164 to 475 people a day. Based on that, they estimated clicks of 13 to 38. Okay, so I'm going to use the bottom end of that. I'm going to use the 13 clicks a day, then times 30 to come up with my go no go perspective, right? So to figure out how many sales I might get of what I'm selling in a month, I start with clicks times the conversion rate equals the units, the number, and you got to round this because you don't sell a quarter of a book or 63% of a book. So that looks like, in this case, it's 13 clicks a day times 30 days, 390 times 0.5%. I'm going to get 2 sales in a month. Doesn't sound that awesome, but it's a 4-book set is what I'm selling. So then if I take that number of units, the 2 times the purchase price, so this is how much it's going to be. That's going to be my gross profit. So I'm looking at gross pulling in $99.98. Now that's for $30 worth of advertising. That's that's not too bad maybe. And this is assuming the bottom end, right? I could always do better than this possibly. I could have a better click-through rate, or I could be higher on the conversion rate, but I'm trying to be very conservative in my estimate. And so if I look at my gross profit then, is I take that number, the $99.98, and I'm going to subtract out the cost of goods sold, so the cost of the books, times however many units, minus the cost of the marketing, right? So that's going to give my net profit. So in this case, it's $99.98 for the books sold. It's $29.97 for the set times 2 and minus 30. It gets me a $10 profit on that $30 of advertising. So if I look at it, then my return on investment is going to look like the net profit divided by the cost of goods sold times the units plus the cost of marketing. And so I'm going to get about an 11% return on investment. That's assuming a pretty, dismal case here, 0.5% conversion rate and the low end of the click-through rate. If my ad is compelling, if, the price point is right, there's lots of things to say those numbers could be higher. But I also could return 0. I mean, I go back to the first part of this is any marketing experiment you choose to use could just fail, right? There was something about, the ad you chose, the colors, the words, or there's no compelling event, right? So, if it's not if it's not like a gift giving time of the year, there might not be a reason to go buy a big set or something like that. So the net of this is, it looks like I'm estimating for this case, I'm going to make about 11% on my overall investment. It's actually not too bad. There's not a lot of things in the world that will consistently return 11%. Now, this is still an experiment. I don't know that this will work, but this is my estimate. And it's as good of an estimate as you might find anywhere else in business. So next, we actually have to conduct the experiment. So when I think about conducting the experiment, every advertising platform has some properties. And those vary considerably. Like what you put into a YouTube ad looks very different than what you put into a Facebook ad, looks very different than ads on Amazon. But the net of it is, those properties, you need to know what those are. And then from that list, pick a variable. And so this is something over the course of the experiment, you're going to make some choices about as you go along. Now, some ad platforms will let you do A/B testing, will let you test this in real time. So, half of your items will have one cover photo, the other half have a different cover photo, things like that. You can do that in real time. Other times, you're going to have to run it for a period of time and then make a change. And so I suggest, if you can't do real time like A/B testing, that you move into doing run it for a quarter of the time. So if it's a month, run it for a week, get your data, and then change your variable. Run it again, change your variable. But that being said, only change your variable if it's not doing as well as you thought, right? If you're way above your expectations of your kind of minimal case, there may be no reason to change that variable, but be prepared to do so. And that variable could be anything from demographics. If you targeted just women, you might target men also, or vice versa. If you had a cover photo you weren't sure was optimal, maybe you try a different cover photo, that kind of thing. And then once you've actually modified the variable, you run it for another quarter of the duration to see how that works out. Once you've run your experiment to conclusion, you know, validate your audience. In other words, you pick this particular audience. Did it fall within the range as far as the clicks and the views that were presented, right? At the beginning of your campaign, I showed you that little clip from Facebook that said, this is what we estimate. If you ran much lower than that, then you know that your ad was just not compelling to that audience. And so you're going to need to do something with that. If it was much higher, well, great. Then let's do that, right? The next thing is views. You've really got to look at that in terms of did those views meet what you wanted, clicks, and conversion rate. Conversion rate's probably the most important thing on this list in that is it really turning over the way you thought? In other words, if you estimated a worst case scenario of 0.5%, but you only got 2.5%, well, then that might actually be a problem with the page you sent them to, as opposed to a problem with the actual advertisement. And so you may still run the net. If your click rate was great, but your conversion rate was poor, then you've got to start looking at, on the other side of that click, what's going on there? Was the price off? Was the content of that ad off? The actual purchase page, is there something you need to fix there? And then maybe run the exact same experiment with just something slightly different on the target page. One of the things I found early in this is I could have the exact same ad with the exact same view rate, but if I was sending them to my personal website, I got different results for the same content than if I sent them to Amazon. That is, I got more clicks sending people to Amazon than to my personal website, and then the conversion rate was different. The other thing I've noticed, just as an aside, is with Facebook ads, if you say learn more instead of buy now, you'll get more clicks. The net of it is I've seen then those more clicks turn into a higher conversion rate. Not sure why people want to learn more rather than buy now, but that's just the facts. And then finally, as we close out, you want to report. And I think the important part of this is have somebody in your life that you can report to that's going to care about this, but maybe not necessarily be directly financially involved. I like the idea of an accountability partner, someone that's going to understand what you're doing, and you can talk to, that's not necessarily doesn't personally feel the pain of that, $30 you might lose or that kind of thing. It goes a long way to helping you be successful. And because when you talk about it, helps you talk through, well, this worked, this didn't, what should I do next? And they may have an observation or a question that you can use for your next thing. So with that, I am done, and I'll leave you on a joke here. What do you call it when a black cat falls on a treadmill? A catastrophe. See you later. Bye.